West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
You muted yourself.
Yeah, I did unmute, especially somebody muted me again. Blame someone else, that's my motto. Our first reading is a synopsis of the papal bull Inter Cetera, issued by Pope Alexander VI, which has come to be known as the Doctrine of Discovery. This synopsis was taken from the website of the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History. On the Doctrine of Discovery. The papal bull Inter Cetera, issued by Pope Alexander VI on May the 4th, 1493, played a central role in the Spanish conquest of the New World. The document supported Spain's strategy to ensure its exclusive right to the lands discovered by Columbus the previous year. It established a demarcation line 100 leagues west of the Azores and Cape Verde Islands, and assigned Spain the exclusive right to acquire territorial possessions and to trade in all lands west of that line. All others were forbidden to approach the lands west of the line without special license from the rulers of Spain. This effectively gave Spain a monopoly on the lands in the New World. The bull stated that any land not inhabited by Christians was available to be, and I quote, discovered, claimed, and exploited by Christian rulers. It also declared that, quote, the Catholic faith and the Christian religion be exalted and be everywhere increased and spread, that the health of souls be cared for, and that barbarous nations be overthrown and brought to the faith itself. End quote. This so-called doctrine of discovery became the basis of all European claims in the Americas, as well as the foundation for the United States' own Western expansion. In the US Supreme Court, in the 1823 case of Johnson versus McIntosh, Chief Justice John Marshall's opinion in the unanimous decision held, quote, that the principle of discovery gave European nations an absolute right to New World lands. In essence, Native Americans had only a right of occupancy, which could be abolished. My own personal comment, I'd say talk about a bull in a china shop, a devastating, destructive piece of writing. The bull Inter Cetera made headlines again throughout the 1990s and in 2000, when many Catholics petitioned Pope John Paul II to formally revoke it and recognize the human rights of indigenous non-Christian peoples. Offered as wisdom for the journey.
May we walk in its light.
Our second reading is from Euripides' play Andromache. Euripides, who lived from approximately 480 to 406 BCE, was a tragedian of classical Athens. Along with Aeschylus and Sophocles, he is one of the three ancient Greek tragedians for whom any plays have survived in full. The title character of his play is Andromache, who is the wife of Hector, slain by Achilles in the ultimate battle of the Trojan War. The play follows her life after the Trojan War, when she is enslaved to Achilles' son, Neoptolemus. Andromache's life is made more precarious when Hermione, the wife of Neoptolemus, becomes jealous of her and enjoins her father, Menelaus, to remove Andromache. Eventually, Achilles' grandfather, Peleus, comes to the aid of Andromache, which is where we are in the play, if you're paying attention. The actual verse is spoken by the chorus. And remember that the chorus in classical Greek drama was a group of actors who described and commented upon the main action of a play with song, dance, and recitation. In this piece of poetry, the chorus exalts Peleus for his honor, while condemning Menelaus for coming to power dishonorably. The claim is that it is better not to gain power if it is done without honor. So, a reading from Andromache by Euripides. Better is conquest when we gain our rights by no reproachful means, no deeds of shame, than if to envy we expose our fame and trample on the laws with impious might. Such laurels, which at first too sweetly bloom, ere long are withered by the frost of time, and scorn pursues their wearers to the tomb. I, in my household or the state, presume to seek that power alone, which rules without a crime. Offered as wisdom for the journey.
May we
May
walk
we
in its
walk
light.
in its light.
So, as we've heard, one of the most important events so far this summer was Pope Francis coming to Canada to apologize to Indigenous people on this land for participating in the Canadian genocide of Indigenous peoples through residential schools. Now, I just want to make it clear that I don't think this is only a Canadian thing or only a Catholic thing. The apology was important not only here in Canada, but also in the United States or Australia, or really anywhere Christian countries colonized across the globe over the past 600 years. And the apology was important for everyone in colonizing nations as well. Really, if we are committed to the web of life, then it's important for every creature on the globe. And I want to reiterate, it's not just a Catholic thing. I can't say that because I've never been Catholic that I'm disconnected from this event. Our entanglement runs much deeper than that. We can renounce our faith or reject the church, but we cannot be disconnected from our history. The web of life connects us to the past as well. whether we call ourselves atheist or non-theist or theist, whatever our denomination or faith tradition. We cannot simply renounce our faith or our country or our history and be absolved from all responsibility. We must reject this move to innocence. And I'm not even saying that people shouldn't try to disconnect from their faith, and I'm not defending or apologizing for the church. I'm saying that leaving one's faith doesn't remove all culpability from the genocide that Pope Francis was apologizing for. I'm saying that detaching ourselves from our culture and our history is not possible. Instead, we must continue to acknowledge who we are and from where we come. We must honor and value our entanglements with our neighbors. And my entanglements with my neighbors began long before I was born. And one of the strands of that entanglement that has been in the news recently with respect to the Pope's visit is, of course, the doctrine of discovery. The particular thread of entanglement, the papal bull Inter Ceterata, issued by Pope Alexander VI in 1493, claimed the right to seize any lands that is not occupied by Christians. And this doctrine has wormed its way into our culture and even our law. We can say that the British Empire wasn't a Catholic empire, but that was disputed at the time. And furthermore, the concepts behind the doctrine of discovery worked its way into the building of the British Empire. And you can see similar worldviews and royal proclamations throughout the years. And the doctrine also wormed its way right into our law. We heard about the U.S. Supreme Court case in 1823, and Chief Justice John Marshall's opinion that the unanimous decision held that the principle of discovery gave European nations an absolute right to new world lands. And the doctrine of discovery has been cited in Canadian courts as recently as the 1990s. And Indigenous experts like Pam Palmater say the doctrine justifies the government to basically take whatever they want. Palmater says that the doctrine of discovery remains infused in Canada's legal system, and that it continues to impact the country's ideologies, concepts, and even common laws. She says, you see, the Supreme Court of Canada just always assumes that Canada has sovereignty, even though it's acknowledged that its Indigenous people have actual sovereignty. And that's where the reconciliation takes place. Because that idea comes from the doctrine of discovery that the crown has the right to the land. And Palmater says, I think an official repudiation of it and the concepts that go along with it, both by the church and the government, will help to start to unravel those cases over time. So you can see why people are calling for the repudiation of the doctrine of discovery. And in fact, last year, the Canadian government officially rejected the doctrine, passing Bill C-15, which aims to harmonize Canada's laws with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And the government called the doctrine racist, scientifically false, legally invalid, morally condemnable, and socially unjust. The Canadian government was confessing that the doctrine is infused with racism and white supremacy. As Palmater says, the doctrine wasn't just about an authorization to steal the lands and resources. It was also about subduing the so-called barbarous nations. And she goes on to say that all the violence and death that happened to Indigenous peoples in the territories are also a part of that. But make no mistake about this. The papal bull was not really concerned with saving souls or converting people to Christianity. It's not concerned with the welfare of the people. And in fact, converting people to Christianity is in some way an act of colonization. So when people go out and tell the good news and try to convert people to Christianity, they're really participating in this colonization over again. And we must be careful not to do that, not only for any Christian faith, but even for our West Hill non-Christian faith. The idea is that we don't have the answer, and that our way is not necessarily the best way. And really, the reason for the doctrine of discovery was the pursuit of wealth. They weren't concerned with people's souls. They were concerned about the land and the lucre. There's gold in them thar hills. Pope Alexander VI and King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella were in search of riches. And those of us whose ancestors come from colonizing countries or currently live in colonizing countries have benefited from this at the expense of those we've colonized. And we're still connected. We're connected with all the people around the world, but we're connected with all the people who have ever lived. We're connected through the passage of time. And this doctrine of discovery has participated in the idea that there is a right for one group of people to simply choose to conquer and take land and resources and lives from another group of people. And we saw from our poetry this morning from Euripides that this idea of conquering another nation goes back much further than the doctrine of discovery. In this poem called Conquest, taken from the play Andromache, it was written over 2,500 years ago. They talk about conquest and the way to do conquest well. And we got this from the play in Andromache. And Chris went through all the connections there with that. But and I know it sounded all complicated, but really all I have to know in this case from this expert of this verse we're reading is that Peleus is good and Menelaus is bad. It chastises Menelaus for winning power dishonorably and praises Peleus for winning power with honor. The verse insists that any conquest must be won honorably. And here's a slightly different translation. It is better to win no dishonorable victory than to trip up justice with power that incurs hatred. True, it is sweet at first, this power, to mortal men, but in time it goes bad and pulls down disgrace upon the house. This power is sweet for most mortal men, but if it's won unethically, then it goes bad and brings disgrace. Euripides is calling for honor. He's not questioning the ethics of seizing power and commandeering resources and enslaving inhabitants. He is not questioning violence and dispossession. He is questioning the process of violence and dispossession. But can we even really agree with that? Reading the poem, it seems pretty normal, but do we really agree with that? Is it morally acceptable to just go and take lands from other peoples just because you have better weapons? And the power gained there, is that truly sweet? Is that power truly sweet? Or is the sweetness of power just empty calories that will rot our teeth and lead us to disease? And the problem with this lust for power is not that it leads us to taking power unjustly. The problem is in the actual lust for power. It is in the actual desire for other people's resources. It's in the actual action of taking the lands and the resources. And perhaps we cannot take power with honor. Perhaps the value in power is not in wielding it, but in sharing it. But we can see how this concept is counter to our history and tradition as far back as classical Greece. The idea that might makes right is ingrained in our culture. But I resist saying that it's part of our human nature. I think it's part of our culture, but not our nature. And we so often mistake our cultural traits as human nature. We don't have to lust for power. We can lust for the common good. We can lust for the well-being of all. We can lust for a new world where everyone has enough to eat and everyone has a place to live. Yes, we are entangled with the past and we are formed by the past. And we are formed by our culture, but we are not prisoners of it. We can have a new world. The events of the past also presents us with possibilities of the future. New ways of being are open to us. We can create a world that honors our interconnectedness, that values our entanglement, and places priority on the well-being of everyone in the web of life. And part of this new world must reject the very values and concepts behind the doctrine of discovery. It must reject Euripides' notion that there is an honorable conquest. We must reject our lust for power and turn it into the lust for a common good. Peace.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.